Hi, everybody. This is Walt Rakowich here. Most of you know that I'm the former chief executive officer at Prologis and also the author of Transfluence, a book about the opportunity that we all have to make a transformative influence on the lives of those that we serve. I'm back for another live chat today with some of the most, I think, thoughtful voices and thought leaders throughout the country. Leaders that are talking about being more human and more effective in how you lead. And so I'm joined today by Steve Farber. Steve's a good friend, and I love his message. I think everybody listening in today will too. Steve's accomplishments: the author of 4 books: The Radical Leap, The Radical Edge, Greater Than Yourself, which, by the way, was a Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller, and Love is Just Damn Good Business, which was listed by Book Authority as one of the top business strategy books for 2020. He is the president of Extreme Leadership. He even has a hat on, I think, that says that today, or that at least has those initials. President of Extreme Leadership, founder of the Extreme Leadership Institute, an organization devoted to the cultivation and development of extreme leaders in the business, nonprofit, and educational communities. He's one of Inc.'s top 50 global leadership and management experts. He's a true thought leader, an incredibly inspirational speaker. And Steve, I just want you to know it's great to have you on with us today.
Thanks, Walt. I've been looking forward to it. It's wonderful to be here with you.
Great to have you on. I just want to shoot an opening question to you. I know you live in San Diego.
Yeah.
And so number one, are you a Chargers fan? And number two, if you are a Chargers fan, are you bummed out that they moved to LA?
First of all, I'm really not a sports fan at all. That's not to say that I don't love sports. I just don't follow it much. So, I grew up in Chicago. So I have a soft spot for the Bears, and I was on the north side of Chicago. So I have a soft spot for the Cubs, and that's about as far as my fandom goes. So that's about it.
That's great. Well, good. Let's launch into some of the kind of questions that I've got for you today. You write about having love, energy, and audacity in leadership.
Yeah. And one more, proof, actually. So that is what I refer to as the Radical Leap, which is also the title of my first book. And it's the what I call the Extreme Leaders Framework. So extreme leadership, first of all, is really just my way of saying real leadership, because leadership by its nature is an extreme act. If we're not, just relying on the title of leader, which many people do, once they get stamped with that label, then, I guess I'm a leader now because it says so on the org chart. Leadership, as you know better than most people, is about what we do, not what we call ourselves. So the extreme leader is a person who cultivates love, generates energy, inspires audacity, and provides proof. And that really simple framework becomes a way to influence people, to engage ourselves and others, to get all the things that we'd like to measure, like productivity and engagement and all of that. It's just a really broad, universal, and really powerful framework.
I think it's a great framework, actually. So you're an extreme guy. I mean, you seem like an extreme guy to me. What do you like to do that's extreme?
Well, it's funny because the way that we use the word extreme, or at least have used the word extreme, comes out of sort of the extreme sports arena. And in fact, when I first started using that label back in the late, I'm going to say late 90s, early 2000s, extreme sports was really, kind of blowing up. I'm not an extreme sports guy. So extreme is a relative term, right? One person's extreme is another person's nap, maybe. But the idea of applying love in business, many people consider to be extreme.
I agree,
I
yeah.
personally don't. I think it's just, as you said, the title of my fourth book is "Love is Just Damn Good Business." I called it that because love is just damn good business. But some people interpret that as extreme because it's unusual. You don't typically use that word in the same sentence as business. But for me personally, I guess what many people would consider to be extreme is I love to get up on stage in front of as many people as possible and play music.
Oh,
And we'll often do that in the context of my keynote speeches. So I don't know, is that extreme? To me, it's not. People, when people are in the audience, who've been listening to me talk for an hour about leadership, suddenly, pull out a guitar and start playing, they think that's extreme because they are scared to death that I'm going to suck. That's that's what that's what happens.
I'll tell I'll tell you what, my daughter got married 3 years ago, and I decided to sing at her wedding whenever I gave the father speech. And, I think there were a lot of people with wide eyes watching me like, "Please don't mess this up."
It's exactly. It's lovely, isn't it? Because they're so they're afraid for you.
They're afraid for you,
They're afraid
exactly.
for you.
Please don't mess up.
It's kind of sweet, actually, when you think about it.
It's great. So you talk about in your book there was a time in your life that where you didn't really love what you were doing,
Yeah,
way back when. And you use that word love a lot, but it's a bummer when you don't like what you're doing or you don't love what you're doing. And you were a commodities trader. You started your own business, which is all great. And
yeah,
but it's a grind. And so from the outside looking in, it probably looked all right, but from the inside looking out, your heart wasn't there. And can
exactly.
you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I started in business. I started everything pretty young. I started a family young. I started a business young. So before I was 30 years old, I had three kids, and by that time, a failed business. So I originally started out wanting to be a musician, and I soon discovered that playing music for a living and feeding people were mutually exclusive pursuits. And that's what I went into business. And I had a friend who worked in the commodities field, commodities futures markets. He gave me a job because I needed to do something, and I discovered I was an entrepreneur because within a few years I had actually had my own small brokerage firm. So I had, people that worked for me. I was responsible for everything as an entrepreneur is. I had to do the marketing and the sales and the training and the compliance and all that stuff. So yeah, from the outside, like you said, from the outside looking in, it's pretty cool. Young guy had his own business already, and the only problem was I freaking hated it. I hated it with a steaming passion. I just was not built for that world, and it's a weird place to be when you literally hate your own business. I loved the people in it, but I was killing myself. I mean, I don't know how long I would have lasted on this planet had I stayed in that. So fortunately, I made the decision to get out, and because I had a business background and a bit of a love for people and a natural ability to connect and communicate, I put it all together and I started doing training workshops for corporations like in the late '80s, which evolved into a career that focused more on leadership and working with all kinds of businesses. So I went from it. I know how important love is in business in large part because I had such a deep experience of the opposite. And I don't think that it's absolutely necessary for people to love their work in order to make money. I know a lot of miserable people that have made a lot of money,
Mm.
but in order to really lead and make a difference in your organization and in the world around you, the heart has to be in it. Otherwise, we just don't have the juice to do what's necessary to make things better.
Yeah, boy, I can't agree with you more. I went through a time I was in public accounting when I first started, and I felt like I was learning a lot, but I just wasn't, it just wasn't right for me long term. And I don't think I was being influential in anybody's lives back then, to be honest.
Yeah,
So you talked about, you gravitated from there. In 1994, I believe you were hired by Tom Peters.
right.
And Peters is, everybody knows, one of the most famous management gurus out there.
Yes.
He wrote one of the greatest books of all time, in my view, In Search of Excellence.
Hmm.
Um, you were there for a while, 6, 7 years, some such.
Right.
You tell us what did you learn there? What's the greatest lesson you learned either from Tom or just from your the partners that were there?
Yeah, it was a very significant part of my career. I had been working for an international consulting company before then, so I had already had a lot of exposure to several companies on a wide scale, and the Tom Peters company experience really brought me deep into the area of leadership. So I ended up being a vice president of that company, and I learned so much during my time there, um, not only from Tom, but and by the way, when you say everybody knows Tom, that's actually not true.
Hmm.
It used to be true, but I'm going to guess that people listening to this right now, if you're under, I'm going to say 50 years old, you may not know who he is,
Yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right.
which is really a shame. He's still really active,
Yeah.
and doing he's brilliant. Probably the most significant management sage of our age, if I could be a little poetic. But the president of the Tom Peters Company at the time was Jim Kouzes.
Mhm.
And Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner, the co-authors of the Leadership Challenge, are just incredible thought leaders in the world of leadership. So Jim actually is also a very significant mentor to me, because I spent a lot of my time teaching and working with clients around that leadership challenge model. So everything that I do now, every book that I've written, every speech that I give, every client engagement that I'm involved in is really very deeply informed by the work of Kouzes and Posner, as well as Tom Peters. That's why it's wonderful to have mentors, of course. So yeah, my time there was incredible. I have very dear friends who I met, who were my colleagues at the Tom Peters Company, people I love dearly. So there I did have a direct experience of working for somebody else and being absolutely in love with the work and with the people that I worked with. It was just a phenomenal time.
I mean, just it must have been, and I remember I was going to business school about that time too, and I remember we talked about Tom Peters all the time,
Yeah.
and and the impact that he's made on me. At the end of the day, I ended up writing a book that was all about it's not about me. It's not about me. I had to learn that lesson.
Yeah.
Not about me, but it is about the influence that we have on other people, and uh, and I know Peters talks a lot about that as well. Um, so I just recently finished your book, Love is Just Damn Good Business. I love that word, damn good business. Kind of got me right in the heart. In the book that you say, and by the way, it's right behind you, I think.
Yeah, yeah, there. Let me move the screen for
There it
there you
is.
go. Yeah.
Do what you love in the service of people who love what you do.
Right.
That's kind of and you kind of break that into 3 different parts in the book, and you kind of break it down. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So this idea that we already started talking about, the importance of doing what you love, particularly as a leader, is really important and it's foundational, but it's not the whole story, right? Because if all I was focusing on was doing what I loved, and it didn't really matter what the impact of that was on anybody else, as long as I'm doing what I love, that's just another way of saying narcissism, right? So doing what I love is where I get my juice from. But then the next thing is, it's the second piece is in the service of people. So yes, I'm doing what I love, but I'm using that to serve you. I'm using that to give value to you. I'm using that to enhance your life in some way. And servant leadership, of course, is not a new idea, but this is not about serving people because we feel that we're supposed to. It's about serving people in such a significant way that the result is reciprocity. In other words, they love us in return. So if you think about it from a business perspective, Um, it's like the ideal scenario, right? When you have customers that raise their hand and say, "I love you. I love doing business with you. I love your brand. I love your company. I love the way you take care of me." Then that's our ideal customer, right?
Mm.
We want more of those. We want to find more of those, which means that we have to behave in a way that attracts that kind of client to us, right? In other words, we have to get really good at creating an experience that our customers are going to love. And once they do love us, they keep coming back, they talk about us, and our business grows. So it's a great business model, but it's also a personal, I like to think of it as at the very least, um, an aspiration, right? It's something to strive for. If I'm firing on all those cylinders, I'm doing what I love, I'm serving people, and the people I'm serving love how I'm serving them. That's just a great way to approach life in general.
Well, it sure is. You know, service is what we're all about, man. That's what we go to work for every day, right? And if we're serving other people, including the people that work for us, not just our clients, that's the big thing. Everybody talks about our customers, serving our customers, serving a customer. No, I mean, if you serve the people around you, then your customers will be happy ultimately.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Once upon a time, back in the '90s, um, Hal Rosenbluth of Rosenbluth Travel wrote a book called "The Customer Comes Second." And that was the whole concept of the book: is you take care of your employees first, and the customer experience will naturally grow from that. And so this is not a new idea. The thing is that if we want our customers to love what we do for them, we have to create an environment that people love working in. So if I can adopt that attitude that I'm here as a leader, my job is to help create an experience that my team, my colleagues, my employees, my associates, whatever terminology you want to use, love coming to work here. And they're growing from it, and they have good relationships here, and the culture feeds them, and vice versa, feeds them emotionally as well as literally. Then they are much more likely to do what's necessary to give our customers an experience that they love. And I have to back it down one more step in this. I can't create that kind of a culture. I can't create an experience that my employees are going to love unless I love it first. So it all gets very personal very quickly. If I don't love my team, if I don't love my company, if I don't love the values that we stand for, the product that we create, the service that we provide, the vision that we have, the mission that we're on, if I don't love that stuff, then I'm just going through the motions. And I'll get things done, but I'm not going to create that incredible environment and those incredible results that we're all seeking after.
as you say, you can make money, but that's not the only objective, right? I mean, there's
Yeah,
a
that's right.
broader objective to that. So I want to talk about, talking about serving other people. I'm going to drill into this just a little bit more. In your book, you give this example about this janitorial company of all things. Janitorial companies, basically typically treats their employees as second class citizens and the like, but how they did an amazing job of caring for their employees. And I won't go into the detail about that. It's a great story. But of all the stories that were in there about serving, the story that really hit me a lot was the one that one of your clients wrote a note to your son about you.
Yeah,
Which and so and nobody, hardly anybody writes notes anymore, right?
that's right.
I
That's
mean, they
right.
might write emails, but it's not all that typical, right? And so, can you talk a little bit about that story and talk about the impact that had on you, but also on your son?
Sure. Yeah, so that was in my formative years at the Tom Peters company that we were talking about a few minutes ago. I was doing a project for Consumers Energy in Michigan, and it was a long project. It was going to go on for ended up going on for several years. And we did an offsite with the senior executives of Consumers. It was like a 4.5 day offsite in the wilds of Michigan in the middle of winter. So as I recall, And I had told a story about my youngest son, Jeremy, was little at the time. He was probably 5, 6 years old. And I told a story about him to the group at the beginning of the workshop. And at the end of the workshop, 4.5 days later, and it was a very intense and really great, deep kind of a thing. Carl English, who was he ran, he was T&D, transmission and distribution for the company. So one of the top 3 guys. He comes up to me and he's got this yellow legal paper in his hand. And he said, "Here, I have something." He said, "For you." He said, "Well, it's actually not for you. It's for your son. So when you get home, would you please give this to him? I want him to know what my experience was like working with you this week." So like an idiot, and I was just getting ready to go up and conduct, the last session, for the group. And like an idiot, I read the note right then. And it was, I mean, it was beautiful. And it just goes on and on about how, your dad is such a great teacher. And if he's anywhere near as good a father as he is a teacher, you're very lucky. And thank you for sharing him with us this week. I know it's difficult for you when your dad's on the road as much as he is. And he's just beautiful like that. And so it really choked me up. And then when I got home the next day, I gave it to Jeremy. I said, "Here, somebody's got something for you." And he read it, and he was kind of chuckling and rolling his eyes. I'm thinking, I guess it didn't have quite the same impact on him as it did on me. But then I said, "Okay." He finished reading. I said, "Okay, so give it back." And he said, "No, it's my note." So he didn't want to give it back. So what I ended up doing was putting it in the book, so you can actually read the entire note in the book. And that note, by the way, was in Jim Kouzes. I shared it with Jim Kouzes all those years ago. He put it in their book, Encouraging the Heart. So it's actually been in a couple of different books. So it's really achieved immortality. But the point is this. Here's the thing. Carl English he's retired now, but people at Consumers loved him. They loved him. And when I started to share with subsequent groups, I would occasionally, tell that story because that's one of their leaders who wrote a note to me. What I discovered was that Carl English notes were all around Consumers. And in just about every group, there was somebody who had a Carl English note. And as it turns out, what he would do is he would arrive at the office early before anybody else was there. And he took a half an hour or so every day to think about the people at Consumers that were doing great work that he knew about firsthand. And he would write them a note every day. He would write a note. And it was his gratitude practice. And you're so right, Walt. We don't write notes anymore. Emails are fine, but emails are not, there's no DNA on an email, right? When you get a note from somebody, a handwritten note, their DNA is on there. I mean, it is tangible, concrete evidence that this person who wrote this note took a few minutes out of their day to do nothing other than think about you.
Yeah.
That's what it represents. And people who've gotten notes like that tend to hold on to them forever. I've met people who've held on to these personal notes, similar notes for 50, 60 years.
Steve, I think at a minimum, I would say this, and I totally agree with you on the note writing. I think it's even in today's world, even if you say, okay, well, I just don't really want to write that note every day. I think at a minimum, I think it's best practice. And I've been trying to train myself to do this too, to get up every morning and write even an email of encouragement to somebody every day.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many people we all know, and it's amazing how many people we interact with. And you actually can do that.
Yeah. And listen, emails are great too. Texts are great.
Text
What
too.
else is great? Voicemails.
Yeah.
To leave a voicemail for somebody, oh my gosh. They again, they can hear your voice over and over and over again. It's a wonderful thing that doesn't take any time, really.
No, it doesn't. I think it's such a best practice. And whether it's a note of gratitude or a note of encouragement, either way.
Yeah.
something critically important, and it is a bit of a lost art today. So
It is.
anyway, so I'm going to change subjects a little bit and go into the COVID world with you.
Yeah.
Um, when I led a team abroad, I got to tell you, I found it tough to really manage remotely. I found it tough, especially if I wanted to be a servant leader. How do you be a servant leader when you can't see somebody and you're not seeing somebody every day and the like? And I think a lot of businesses, a lot of leaders, managers are struggling with this today because they actually can't see people. I mean, I see you and the like, but it's not like I'm next to you day to day.
Right.
And so, and especially in this COVID environment. And so, do you think it's harder to be a servant leader? Do you think it's harder to serve other people in this environment?
Well, I think that, first of all, let's acknowledge nothing will ever take the place of face to face, being in the same room, breathing the same oxygen, sitting down, having a meal together or a cup of coffee, bumping into each other in the hallway. That's always the ideal scenario. But even before COVID, this was a challenge for a lot of people because companies were becoming more and more virtual and spreading out all over the world. So this is not a new challenge. It's the immenseness of it that's new. It's the fact that we're all having to figure this out. That virtually everybody went virtual. At least for a time. I mean, people are some places starting to come back together, but it's still this is a part of our lives now, and will forever be. So let's acknowledge that it's always going to be inherently challenging to connect with people who are not physically present with you. So what that means to me is we have to do even more to go out of our way to connect. We can't rely on just hanging out with somebody and reading each other's body language and having a drink together. So that means um, some of the things that we were doing in the beginning of COVID, I think are really wonderful. Like, people started to have virtual happy hour, virtual hangouts. Let's just get together and hang out and let's play a game. Introduce me to your pet. And ironically, I've had several people tell me that they got to know people on their teams better than they had when they were in the office all day, simply because they were sitting in their living room, right?
Yep.
So, you're sitting there saying, hey, is that a guitar behind you? I didn't know you play guitar. Hey, what kind of cat is that? I didn't know you had a cat. Hey, you're married? I didn't know you were married. You have kids? That kind of a thing. And which is ridiculous. I mean, we should know those kinds of things about each other. But
Right.
nonetheless, there's the positive side of it is we got to see a different aspect of each other's lives because of the environments that we were in. So from a leadership perspective, we have to go out of our way to spend more time getting to know people, uh, even through a virtual or especially through a virtual kind of environment. So why not just take a couple of minutes every week and just have an agenda free call, Zoom call, for example, with somebody on your team. No agenda. We're just going to hang out for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is, and just get to know each other. Because what happens is we tend to project our experience on everybody else. So for me, being locked down and not traveling, I like everybody else had to pivot in terms of my business and doing keynotes and all that virtually instead of in person, and coaching on Zoom and all that stuff that everybody else had to do. But what I realized was I actually had it pretty good because it's my wife and we actually like each other. So just the two of us together, we're empty nesters, and we had more time to spend together. Well, that's great. But um, what if you're single and alone and isolated?
Yeah.
Doesn't feel so great. Or what if you have 3 little kids at home who are not going to school now, and you got to take care of that and work? So I had to remind myself that, oh, the experience that I'm having is not the same experience that other people are having necessarily. And then for the introverts of the world, this was like the greatest gift ever. I don't have to see anybody. I don't have to talk to anybody. It's like, this is fantastic. But that means then that we have to be overly sensitive to and curious about other people's states of mind, experience at home, and all that, so we can figure out what, if anything, we could do to help them through it. And so I think there's a lot of good that will come out of this. And people are getting better at doing that overall.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's absolutely right. I think you have to be more intentional though about everything right now.
Yes.
And if you're not, unfortunately, I think it's a much more difficult environment to lead in. So I'd like to switch gears a little bit with you, Steve, because I just wrote a chapter that is an add-on to Transfluence about empathy. And you talk about empathy, the importance of empathy in serving other people too. And I got to tell you, when I wrote the chapter, I talk about how we might rethink the word, because, and I'm just being honest with people, I struggle with it. Not a lot of people score high in empathy in the first place, and I just have trouble sometimes sharing someone else's feeling, walking alongside of them. And I can have an intellectual understanding and I can listen and I can even be sympathetic. But sometimes it's really hard to walk alongside of somebody. I mean, truly walk alongside, which is really the definition of it, in leadership. And I write about it just candidly. I struggle with it. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of empathy? And can you talk a little bit about whether or not you struggle with it as well?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, what I'm advocating for is coming from and operating out of, in a very tangible way, love. Okay. So what does love look like in the way that we show up, in the way that we do business, in the way that we interact with each other? That's the operating question behind the book and behind all of my work, frankly. It's not about love as a sentiment or, just kind of an empty, it's not a greeting card sort of a love. It's how do you put it into practice? How do you operationalize it in the way that you are, in the way that you work? So that is a very broad umbrella. And there are many things that, people will say to me, well, why isn't it trust instead of love? And why isn't it compassion? And why isn't it empathy? And why isn't it? Well, it's all of the above, actually. So in terms of empathy, um, it's like anything else. We can all get better at it. And I don't know that we can show deep empathy for another person without fully understanding what they're going through. Because honestly, you can't fully understand what somebody's going through unless you've been through a near identical experience. If you've lost a child or been divorced or gotten sick or whatever, to say, "Oh, I know how you feel." I know how you feel. What's the typical response you're going to get from somebody? You don't know how I feel, right? So don't pretend. But empathy, to me, it starts with the desire to know how they feel. If I have the desire to know what you're experiencing, that is way ahead of a lot of people who just don't give a shit.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we need to give ourselves, I'm not going to say, I was going to say, give ourselves credit for it, but at least acknowledge that we have that desire, cultivate that desire. So it's not about pretending to care. It's about, I really want to be able to understand what you're going through. That in and of itself, to me, is empathy, because the only way for me to understand it is to walk side by side with you and hear your story.
So,
If I can hear your story, then I can find something in my life, in my story, that relates to that. That's why we love listening to each other's stories, because it resonates with us somehow. And the more we get, we can do that, the better we're going to get at empathy. So Walt, for you to say, you can be better at it, and and there's a sense of by now I should be better at this, but I mean, come on, man. It's just the fact that you're struggling with that, you want to be better at it, is pretty cool, because most people, like I said, they don't even care to do that.
No, I think that's right. And I think it does start with listening. I really do, and wanting to walk side by side.
Yeah.
It's just, I just want everybody to acknowledge the fact that you can't always perfectly do that.
No,
And I've
you
seen a
can't.
number of different situations with that, and people loosely talk about that word, but they don't always talk about the challenges associated with really being good at that.
All of this stuff is really easy to talk about.
Oh, it is, but it's really hard to put in practice.
Yeah.
Um, all right, so I have two more questions for you, and then we'll wrap up. The first is that and this is just coming from me. This is not from your book. This is kind of my way of thinking. But I kind of think effective leaders, the best leaders, not only have a big vision, but they're really good at the small things. They're good at doing the little things that show people that they care.
Yeah.
you know um and sometimes it seems like doing the small things as a leader really do build up to performance over time, and people want to kill to work for you, and those sorts of things. And so, Steve, do you have any practices, or have you seen leaders that are out there that do the small things right? Just kind of curious.
Yeah, I think it's we have a tendency to fall into an either or mentality or frame of mind. So, are leaders good at vision? Are they good at the small things? The answer is yes. it's it's all the above, right? So the small things, the gestures, the conversations, the pats on the back, the notes that we were talking about. We can make a list of probably 1,000 of those things. And actually, in the book, it's story after story after story after story of mostly small things that do add up. But the vision, the big picture, and all that is also important, because the small things are are in the context of what it is that we're trying to do together. What is it that we're trying to accomplish? Where are we trying to go? So to be able to paint a vision as a leader, a vision of where we want to take our team or our entire company, if I'm the CEO, to create that vision, not in a way, again, that serves me solely or serves my stakeholders or shareholders solely, but that everybody can see themselves in. And then if I know where we're headed, and I can get a sense of how I can help get us there, then the small things, like the words of encouragement and acknowledgement and all that, are meaningful in that context as well. It's not just, oh, what a nice person you are, but, oh, that gives me more energy to help us get that done, right? And of course, the key to all this, I say of course, but it may not be obvious. It's not about pretending. It's not about how can I, what, give me a list of small things that I could do, even though I really don't care about these people, but I got to do a few things because I got to get them engaged so we can get our mission accomplished. That is not what you or I are talking about here. It starts with the love, right? So it starts with the smallest thing, which is to ask a very simple question. And that is, why do I love this? Why do I love this team? Why do I love these people? Why do I love this work? And how do I show it? Why do I love it? How do I show it? So I I am a big believer in giving people the context that says this is a worthwhile pursuit, but then turning them loose to figure out what those small things are for yourself. So if you can just sit with that question, Why do I start with the people around you? Why do I love the people on my team? And how can I show it better? And see where that takes you.
I
And
like
it's the
that.
small things that make the difference.
It is. It is the small things that make the difference in my view. And I'm going to ask you one more question. Speaking of all of that, and speaking of love, what are you most grateful for, Steve?
For me, it always comes down to friendships. I there is no uh, greater joy for me than hanging out with people that I love. So when I say friendships, I include family in that, because it's a similar kind of a dynamic to me. I mean, the people that I enjoy being around, and that's why COVID was really difficult. There was for a lot of people is that we were separated from our friends. For me personally, um, the first time I was able to get together with friends who live like 2 blocks away from me and hug them was was a great moment because we hadn't done that for so long. So I'm most grateful for the friends in my life, and I'm grateful for the fact that I have many of them. And I have many friends and of a wide variety. And every so often, we haven't done it for a while because of COVID, but we put on an event here in San Diego called the Extreme Leadership Experience. And I invite speakers who are simpatico with whose work is simpatico with mine. Like our mutual friend Tommy Spalding has spoken a couple of times, and lots of people like that who kind of live in this same place, and we bring everybody together, and it is a remarkable experience. And the comments that I hear from people, from the participants, and from other speakers is, I can't believe the people that you know and that they all and they came here for this because they want to. And so for me, it's just getting that reflected back. It's like, yeah, you know what, that's true. That's true. I have some really really extraordinary friends, and I'm so deeply grateful for that.
You
So
know,
thank you for asking. Now I'm thinking about all my friends, including you.
no, I'm thinking about my friends too, and it's ironic that you would just bring that up because I'm having lunch with Tommy Spalding today, of all things. He's taking me out for my birthday lunch. That my birthday was yesterday, so
Well, happy birthday. Give him a big wet kiss for me. I dare you. I dare you.
I will.
Okay.
That's what friends are all about. And so, Steve, with that, I just want you to know it has been wonderful having you on today. And
Thank
I've
you.
learned a lot about love. I do think it is kind of an odd thing when you talk to people about love. They're like, really? Come on, in business, but it's just great to hear what you have to say. And
Hey,
I,
Walt, if I could say one more thing
sure.
about all this. So Love is Just Damn Good Business was my fourth book. And then a couple of weeks ago, I have a new book that just came out that's called so set this up in your mind. There's Love is Just Damn Good Business. And then the next book, the one that just came out, is called Twisted Business. And I co-wrote it with JJ French, who is the founder of, manager of, and guitarist for the rock band Twisted Sister. So this is his story. Now, what is the through line with Love, from Love is Just Damn Good Business to a book about a heavy metal rock band and their experience, and how they have had multiple platinum and gold records and all of that. And you'd be surprised to know that it is not a stretch. It is not a stretch.
Right.
That my original connection with JJ was, he heard me speak at a conference actually, and he said, "What you just described is the way that I'm in the entertainment business." He said, "That's the way that I've always conducted my business." And that's a business filled with lots of, let's just say, bad people. But I've always believed that I could love people and do the right thing, and I would be successful as a result of it. So you can find love anywhere even in the business of rock and roll.
I'm dying to read the book now. That's great. All right, Steve. Well, listen, I just want to thank you. First of all, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Steve, I want to thank you for being so gracious with your time today. If you'd like to learn more about Steve's work, his website is stevefarber.com. Obviously, if you'd like to find out more about me and Transfluence, Walt Rakowich, which I know is a little bit more difficult to spell, RAKOWICH.com. And also, I'd like you to keep an eye out. We try to do this on a monthly basis. However, we'll be doing another one in 2 weeks from now. And so keep an eye out for that future live stream. And I'd encourage everybody in the meantime to please have a positive influence on those around you each and every day. Thank you so much, Steve. Great to be on with you.
Thank you, Walt, and amen to that.
All right. Take care, brother.